The history of Israel encompasses the Jewish history in the land of Israel, as well as the history of the modern state of Israel. Modern Israel is roughly located on the site of the ancient kingdoms of Israel and Judah, except that these kingdoms also included what is now the West Bank. It is the birthplace of the Hebrew language and of the Abrahamic religions. It contains sites sacred to Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Druze and Baha'i faith. Although coming under the sway of various empires and home to a variety of ethnicities, the land of Israel was predominantly Jewish until the 3rd century. The area became increasingly Christian after the 3rd century and then largely Muslim some centuries following the 7th century conquest until the middle of the 20th century. It was a focal point of conflict between Christianity and Islam between 1096 and 1291, and from the end of the Crusades was part of the Syrian province of first the Mamluk Sultanate and then the Ottoman Empire until the British conquest. In 1917, Zionism emerged in the late 19th century. Following the British conquest of Syria, the Balfour Declaration in World War I and the formation of the Mandate of Palestine, Ilya increased and gave rise to Arab-Jewish tensions, and a collision of the Arab and Jewish nationalist movements. Israeli independence in 1948 was marked by massive migration of Jews from both Europe and the Muslim countries to Israel, and of Arabs from Israel, followed by the extensive Arab-Israeli conflict. About 42% of the world's Jews live in Israel today, the largest Jewish community in the world. Since about 1970, the United States has become the principal ally of Israel. In 1979, an uneasy Egypt-Israel peace treaty was signed, based on the Camp David Accords. In 1993, Israel signed Oslo I Accord with the Palestine Liberation Organization, and in 1994 Israel-Jordan Treaty of Peace was signed. Despite efforts to establish peace between Israel and Palestinians, many of whom live in Israel or in Israeli-occupied territories, the conflict continues to play a major role in Israeli and international political, social and economic life. The economy of Israel was initially primarily socialist and the country dominated by social democratic parties until the 1970s. Since then the Israeli economy has gradually moved to capitalism and a free market economy, partially retaining the social welfare system. Prehistory. Between 2.6 and 0.9 million years ago, at least 4 episodes of hominin dispersal from Africa to the Levant are known, each culturally distinct. The flint tool artifacts of these early humans have been discovered on the territory of the current state of Israel, including, at Yaron, the oldest stone tools found anywhere outside Africa. Other groups include 1.4 million years old Acheulean industry, the Bizet Ruhama group and Gesher Bnot Yaakov. In the Carmel mountain range at El Tabun, and S School, Neanderthal and early modern human remains were found, including the skeleton of a Neanderthal female, named Tabunai, which is regarded as one of the most important human fossils ever found. The excavation at El Tabun produced the longest stratigraphic record in the region, spanning 600,000 or more years of human activity, from the Lower Paleolithic to the present day, representing roughly 1 million years of human evolution. Ancient times. Egyptian rule during the 2nd millennium BC, Canaan, part of which later became known as Israel, was dominated by the New Kingdom of Egypt from c. 1550 to c. 1180. Early Israelites. The first record of the name Israel occurs in the Merneptah stela, erected for Egyptian pharaoh Merneptah c. 1209 BCE. Israel is laid waste and his seed is not. William Dever sees this, Israel, in the Central Highlands as a cultural and probably political entity, more an ethnic group rather than an organized state. Ancestors of the Israelites may have included Semites native to Canaan and the Sea peoples. McNutt says, it is probably safe to assume that sometime during Iron Age a population began to identify itself as Israelite. differentiating itself from the Canaanites through such markers as the prohibition of intermarriage, an emphasis on family history and genealogy, and religion. The first use of grapheme-based writing originated in the area, probably among Canaanite peoples resident in Egypt. All modern alphabetical writing systems are descended from this writing. Written evidence of the use of Classical Hebrew exists from about 1000 BCE. It was written using the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet. Villages had populations of up to 300 or 400, which lived by farming and herding, and were largely self-sufficient. Economic interchange was prevalent. Writing was known and available for recording, even in small sites. The archaeological evidence indicates a society of village-like centers, but with more limited resources and a small population. Israel and Judah. The Hebrew Bible describes constant warfare between the Jews and other tribes, including the Philistines, whose capital was Gaza. The Bible states that King David founded a dynasty of kings and that his son Solomon built a temple. Yigal-Yadin's excavations at Hazor, Megiddo, Beit Shean and Gezer uncovered structures that he and others have argued date from his reign. But others, such as Israel Finkelstein and Neil Silberman, argue that they should be dated to the Omride period, more than a century after Solomon. This building is not mentioned in surviving extra-biblical accounts. Possible references to the House of David have been found at two sites: the Tel Dan Stela and the Mesha Stela, which describes an 840 BCE Judean invasion of Moab. Both David and Solomon are widely referenced in Jewish, Christian and Islamic texts. Around 930 BCE, following the death of Solomon, the kingdom split into a southern kingdom of Judah and a northern kingdom of Israel. The Bible's books of Kings states that soon after the split Pharaoh Shishak invaded the country, plundering Jerusalem. An inscription over a gate at Karnak in Egypt recounts such an invasion by Pharaoh Sheshonq I. It is possible that an alliance between Ahab of Israel and Ben-Hadad II of Damascus managed to repulse the incursions of the Assyrians, with a victory at the Battle of Karka. However, the kingdom of Israel was eventually destroyed by Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III around 750 BCE. The Philistine kingdom was also destroyed. The Assyrians sent most of the northern Israelite kingdom into exile, thus creating the lost tribes of Israel. The Samaritans claim to be descended from survivors of the Assyrian conquest. An Israelite revolt was crushed after the siege and capture of Samaria by the Assyrian king Sargon II. Sargon's son, Sennacherib, tried and failed to conquer Judah. Assyrian records say he leveled 46 walled cities and besieged Jerusalem, leaving after receiving extensive tribute. Modern scholars believe that refugees from the destruction of Israel moved to Judah during the rule of King Hezekiah, greatly expanding Jerusalem and leading to construction of the Siloam Tunnel, which could provide water during a siege. The refugees brought with them new religious ideas which led, under King Josiah, to the writing of the books of Deuteronomy, Joshua and to the accounts of the kingship of David and Solomon in the Book of Kings. The books are known as Deuteronomist and considered to be a major key step in the emergence of monotheism in Judah. They were written at a time that Assyria was weakened by the emergence of Babylon and may be a committing to text of more ancient verbal traditions. Exile under Babylon. In 586 BCE, King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon conquered Judah. According to the Hebrew Bible, he destroyed Solomon's temple and exiled the Jews to Babylon. The defeat was also recorded by the Babylonians. Babylonian and biblical sources suggest that the Judean king, Jehoiachin, switched allegiances between the Egyptians and the Babylonians, and that invasion was a punishment for allying with Babylon's principal rival, Egypt. The exiled Jews may have been restricted to the elite. Jehoiachin was eventually released by the Babylonians, and according to both the Bible and the Talmud, the Judean royal family continued as head of the exile in Babylon. Second Temple period. Persian and Hellenistic rule. In 538 BCE, Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylon and took over its empire. Cyrus issued a proclamation granting subjugated nations religious freedom. According to the Hebrew Bible, 50,000 Judeans, led by Zerubbabel, returned to Judah and rebuilt the temple. A second group of 5,000, led by Ezra and Nehemiah, returned to Judah in 456 BCE, although non-Jews wrote to Cyrus to try to prevent their return. Scholars believe that the final Hebrew versions of the Torah and books of Kings date from this period, that the returning Israelites adopted an Aramaic script, which they brought back from Babylon. This is the current Hebrew script. The Hebrew calendar closely resembles the Babylonian calendar and probably dates from this period. In 333 BCE, the Macedonian ruler Alexander the Great defeated Persia and conquered the region. Sometime thereafter, the first translation of the Hebrew Bible, the Septuagint, was begun in Alexandria. After Alexander's death, his generals fought over the territory he had conquered. Judah became the frontier between the Seleucid Empire and Ptolemaic Egypt, eventually becoming part of the Seleucid Empire in 198 BCE. In the 2nd century BCE, Seleucid ruler Antiochus IV Epiphanes tried to eradicate Judaism in favor of Hellenistic religion. This provoked the 174-135 BCE Maccabean Revolt led by Judas Maccabeus. The books of the Maccabees describe the uprising and the end of Greek rule. A Jewish party called the Hasidians opposed both Hellenism and the revolt but eventually gave their support to the Maccabees. Modern interpretations see this period as a civil war between Hellenized and Orthodox forms of Judaism. Hasmonean dynasty. The Hasmonean dynasty of priest-kings ruled Judea with the Pharisees, Sadducees and Essenes as the principal Jewish social movements. As part of the struggle against Hellenistic civilization, the Pharisee leader Simeon ben Shetich established the first schools based around meeting houses. This led to rabbinical Judaism. Justice was administered by the Sanhedrin, which was a rabbinical assembly and law court whose leader was known as the Nasi. The Nasi's religious authority gradually superseded that of the temple's high priest. The Hasmoneans continuously extended their control over much of the region, by means of conquest and enslavement. In 125 BCE, the Hasmonean king John Hyrcanus subjugated Edom and forcibly converted the population to Judaism. In 64 BCE, the Roman general Pompey conquered Syria and intervened in the Hasmonean civil war in Jerusalem. In 47 BCE, the lives of Julius Caesar and his protégé Cleopatra were saved by 3,000 crack Jewish troops sent by King Hyrcanus II and commanded by Antipater, whose descendants Caesar made kings of Judea. Herodian dynasty from 37 BCE to 06 CE. The Herodian dynasty, Jewish Roman client kings, descended from Antipater, ruled Judea. Herod the Great considerably enlarged the temple, making it one of the largest religious structures in the world. Despite its fame, it was in this period that rabbinical Judaism, led by Hillel the Elder, began to assume popular prominence over the temple priesthood. The Jewish temple in Jerusalem was granted special permission not to display an effigy of the emperor, becoming the only religious structure in the Roman Empire that did not do so. Special dispensation was granted for Jewish citizens of the Roman Empire to pay a tax to the temple. Roman Judea. Judea was made a Roman province in 6 CE. Following the next decades, though prosperous, the society suffered increasing tensions between Greco-Roman and Judean populations. In 64 CE, the high priest Joshua ben Gamliel introduced a religious requirement for Jewish boys to learn to read from the age of 6. Over the next few hundred years, this requirement became steadily more ingrained in Jewish traditions. In 66 CE, the Jews of Judea rose in revolt against Rome, naming their new state as Israel. The events were described by the Jewish leader, historian Josephus, including the desperate defense at Jotapata, the siege of Jerusalem, and the desperate last stand at Masada under Eleazar ben Yair. Josephus estimated that over 1 million people died in the siege of Jerusalem. Jerusalem and the temple lay in ruins. During the Jewish revolt, most Christians, at this time a subsect of Judaism, removed themselves from Judea. The rabbinical, Faraki movement led by Yochanan ben Zakkai, who opposed the Sadducee temple priesthood, made peace with Rome and survived. After the war, Jews continued to be taxed in the Ficus Judaicus, which was used to fund a temple to Jupiter.